Chris, thanks for making the trip, man.
Pleasure to be here, Mike. Good to see you again.
Good seeing you. We're catching up on all the FBI drama.
There's a lot of drama to go around right now these days.
How are you feeling being retired? I mean, it's got to be weird, right? Because I know you're a kind of guy who wants to fix problems, but you're also retired now. So, what's the dilemma for you now?
Watching what's going on, not being able to help, not being able to comment. And, what's interesting is some of the same, I would say, decisions are being made now that were made after 9/11 that didn't turn out very well. It's hard to offer guidance or support because all of us are gone from that time period. So the new leadership is struggling through some things, and they're kind of learning by fire, and it's a bad way to do things right now.
Yeah, I feel like institutionally, you guys, kind of the old guard, have a lot of legacy knowledge that's very important that overcame a lot of political issues, and you guys are the most resilient generation and class of agents, and now
Well,
you're all retired.
Well, I don't know if we're the most resilient, but I would say that we did weather some pretty significant storms after 9/11 and some other events leading up to 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, then the 93 World Trade Center bomb, so there was a progression of events and then that massive change environment after 9/11 for the FBI. We weathered a lot of storms, and then the guys now who are there in charge are weathering their own storms, but seeing some decisions being made that maybe we could tell them where the minefields are that
Yeah.
we ran into and they could avoid them.
Yeah, this is the second time I've interviewed Chris, and you're a senior career FBI agent. Can you just give a recap
Sure.
just on your bio, just for people to know?
Sure, real quick, spent 25 years with the FBI, came in right after the first World Trade Center bombing, spent my first tour of duty in the Newark field office, was sitting in my office in the morning of 9/11, 2001, saw the first tower strike, the smoke rising, and was with the FBI through many different operational roles, a couple of them of note. Did a lot of counterintelligence, counterterrorism work, technical operations, was the special agent in charge of the Buffalo, New York field office, covered the whole western half of New York. I was the director of the Terror Screening Center, which is the government's consolidated counterterrorism global screening operation. And when I retired, I was one of the 8 most senior folks in the organization as career folks go. And I was in charge of all of the FBI's science and technology programs because I had a technical background before I joined. So I had a great career. And I think I told you last time, if they let me go back and do it again, I would.
Yeah, it sounds like a really diverse career field because you didn't just focus on one specific task. You had a multitude of skill sets, including S&T. I think that's one of the coolest thing in science and technology component to that.
Oh, it was a fantastic area because we use technology and scientific approaches to gain advantage over our adversaries and competitors. And you're looking at terrorist organizations, transnational organized crime. You're looking at hostile nation state level counterintelligence operations that are conducted both here and abroad against us. So we partner with people across the intelligence and law enforcement communities. So I was an enterprise service provider of a wide variety of services, and I'll summarize them really quickly for you. One was the operational technology division,
Mm,
and that's where we did all the cool James Bond stuff you see on TV.
mm,
And then I had the FBI laboratory division, which think about CSI for the FBI. They did all of the criminal forensic work. They would do post blast analysis on explosives. They would do shooting scene reconstructions, all that type of work, very high level, considered like premier crime lab operation. And I also had the Criminal Justice Information Services Division, which was a national asset program for the databasing of criminal information, criminal justice files, biometrics, and things of that sort.
mm.
And I also oversaw they called it the Terrorist Explosive Devices Analytical Center, which we did in concert with Department of Defense and some international partners for counter IED work around the globe. So a lot of different areas, and again, it was a great program to oversee because we saw the benefits that we could provide to the intelligence community and law enforcement folks.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool when I do targets with HRT, and we had one or two other operators with us, and me and typically the guy who was an HRT guy would set up the BGAN, and we would send the biometrics from the terrorists we killed immediately off target. I mean, we would be on target
Right.
sending biometric stuff, and I'm like, you guys have the ability to reach out and send that information like this? He's like, yeah, man, it's just part of the job. I'm like, wow.
Yeah, we try to do real time for threat analysis as well as for threat prevention and, for positive ID on certain activities and stuff. So we have global networks of communication for that type of work.
It's incredible, man. Um, there's a whole bunch of things going on with the FBI. I've never in my lifetime seen so much news coverage of the FBI ever. I mean, have you ever seen so much news?
No, it wasn't. Usually the Bureau did its work, and when you heard about the FBI, it was because it was at the end of a law enforcement action or
Yeah,
something they did
yeah,
or they were participating in. But I don't think it's a good thing that they're in the news every day, that they're the focus of media reporting on a day-to-day basis. I don't think it's a good thing. I think it's a distraction from what their core mission is, which is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution. That is the core mission set of the FBI. And they do that by conducting national security operations and conducting crime fighting operations. That's what they do.
yeah,
And I think all this other stuff is a distraction between social media and your traditional media coverage.
yeah. I saw the thing that kind of boggled my mind was this advertisement that they were going to go after criminals that were getting away with it, and everybody's like, "Yeah, get them." And then what I realized in a lot of those events, because now the federal government going after you in a federal charge, they don't go light. I mean, it's
So
like 10 years, like
you
minimum.
well, one of the thing, a couple items there. You mentioned the use of FBI personnel for those migrant operations.
Yeah,
That was kind of a novel approach because FBI doesn't have those authorities, and they're really not. That's not what they do. Now they went out and supported ICE and they supported our partners at DHS,
yeah,
but that's way out of their authority scope. So that was kind of an odd thing for them to be involved with. When you're looking at federal authorities, I remember when I was a special agent in charge, I used to tell people, let us come in and take these people because they do federal time. If it's 10 years, they serve 10 years.
yeah,
They're not coming back.
yeah,
Whereas sometimes the state would pick them up or, the county, and they would get 5 years, they'd be back in one.
yeah. They don't have the capacity to
They
deal with
just
these
they let
guys.
them out early. They have those amnesty programs and
Yeah,
everything. So yeah, but when we had gang problems and things like that, I'd say let me take them, and we would take them, and they would go away.
yeah,
So yeah, that's when you bring federal authorities. It really augments the I would say negative outcomes or the disincentives for crime when they're doing federal time.
yeah. And I think as soon as they started enforcing the law, it
Yeah.
stopped. A lot of that stuff stopped. There were small skirmishes and
Well,
pockets of resistance, and there were issues, but for the most part, that was a deterrence. And I have never seen anything like that because typically it's not advertised. And they came out and said, we are going, Bondi and Patel came out and said, we're going to go after you,
yeah.
and you're going to spend a long time in prison. And then all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, these guys aren't messing around.
Well, I think what you saw was the previous administration took such a light touch and they were so lax
Yeah.
when they did anything. If they did anything, a
Yeah.
lot of the stuff
If,
was
yeah.
just kind of condoned. So I think folks were testing the waters with the new administration coming out and doing some of the more, I would say, violent protesting or some of the more kinetic protesting. And when that got shut off real quick and people were going to jail and the federal law enforcement took a much more aggressive countering stance to it,
Yeah.
you see it dying down now because they know that this isn't the same FBI, it's not the same DHS or other whatever other federal law enforcement. These guys aren't kidding. Maybe we should rethink this.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on, I'm going to ask you about the Epstein files.
Sure.
It's an interesting dynamic because a lot of people have jumped on the bandwagon that the reason it's not being released is because Trump's on it. And I'm like, guys, that's the easiest trick in the book. But the Democrats, I mean, this was a '07, '08, even before that case, he was on the radar of the FBI in Florida. And that was something they could have utilized many times over on many different occasions. But it was so clunky how things came out, where you had Bongino, who's been an advocate for the president, who's in that position because of that advocacy, but he's always been talking about the Epstein files and we need to release the files, release the files. And then you get Patel on Rogan, which I thought was a strange interaction. And Rogan had pushed back because he said justifyingly, this dude's the director of the FBI. If he's telling me something, I'm not going to hard push him to tell me something else.
So you want to call him a liar.
Yeah, you're not going to, yeah.
Exactly.
And so what's your whole take on it? Because it's very confusing.
I think the Epstein file issue has become a layered problem. First of all, the investigative work that was done has to be reviewed, and it has to be, I would say, scoured for proper protocol procedure, make sure the investigations were done right. That should have been done right after or during, actually. The FBI has quality assurance protocols while you're doing the investigation to make sure it's being done right. But, that could have been complex and there could have been a lot of issues. I think what happened was when they were talking about the Epstein files, it became a campaign issue. And it became a campaign issue as opposed to an investigative law enforcement issue, which then they were making promises before they saw the information. They were making assurances before they were able to see exactly what they had to work with. They didn't know what they had, and they were using the term on day one. You saw on day one, they got in office, and I'm sure a bunch of folks sat Director Patel down and the Madam Attorney General and said, here's what you're responsible for now, and this is what's going on. And they all got a serious case of the for real saying, like, are you kidding me? Type of thing. I also think that they should remove the term day one from their lexicon. On day one, they could have promised to conduct a review to see what the previous administration had done, or the previous Department of Justice leadership had done. That would have been fair, but they were promising to release it. And then they had that debacle with the binders being handed out to social media influencers. So very strange, very, very outside of normal, again, information communication protocol. And it turned out that most of that information was already out in the public. I saw a staff failure there. Did the AG actually know what she was putting out? Did the staff sit in front of her and say, Madam AG, 95% of what you're about to give these people has already been out in public. We did a due diligence check. Nothing new, but we're verifying what the previous administration, that would have put a different tone on what they were putting out, including some of the social media influencers. Could have been one of their transparency things, but they shouldn't have excluded the mainstream media.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of, I think what I consider to be a lot of missteps on that. And now it's become another set of political reindeer games where they're saying there is no list, there are no names, and I think they overpromised, underdelivered. They made statements before they really knew what they had, and I think that they dug themselves a hole, that the only way they're going to get out of this is for the Attorney General and possibly Director Patel to get up in front of some podiums, explain the situation. Here's why we're not releasing these things. And I will take questions and just take the bullets as they come. Yeah. That's the only way to do it. And I said this to a congressman I sat with. What the American people don't seem to understand is, if there is information, and I said this months ago, Mike, if there is information that the United States government was able to obtain through this Epstein investigation that could give us a strategic advantage over other governments, that could give us information that we could influence certain people or things around the world to our advantage, that information will never, ever be released. Period. It will never be released.
Is that what you think happened?
I'm speculating.
Partially.
Right? Because, from what I understand in the open source media, a lot of people went there that were of certain influence and importance. We don't know what kind of business was conducted there and who was involved with what. But I think there could be some information that could be harmful to maybe other world leaders, influential people, what have you, that the United States government now has. And, everybody's talking about that now. I said it months and months ago that that has to be something. And the congressman I was talking with said, I never thought of it that way. Why can't we just release it all? Because we can't.
Yeah. If they just label national security on top of it, then it's never going to see the light of day ever, right?
More than likely, no.
Yeah.
Especially if it has any kind of longevity to the influence or the access that our intelligence community and or some of our partners may need or want for strategic issues. Right?
Did you have, I know you've had interactions with the CIA as an FBI guy.
Right.
What was that overall relationship like? I mean, my relationship, I always tell the stories like I'm in a fire base in Afghanistan. Multiple occasions this has happened where a call comes in and you pick up the phone and it's like, yeah, this is such and such in the agency. You're going to get a direct attack today at 9 p.m., blah, blah, blah. And then they hang up the phone and you're like, who the hell? Like no context, no ability to ask questions.
Right.
And you're like, dude, what is going on with these guys? And as a senior, that was a junior guy. As a senior guy, I had to really walk on eggshells around the agency because they were almost exclusively the approving authority for intel collection in nearly every country I operated in.
Well, overseas, that's their thing.
Yeah, they could shut me down at any time. And so we had to play ball, build rapport, and just play this game. What was your relationship like with the agency?
It evolved over time. In the beginning, before 9/11, the FBI and the CIA hated each other. They actually
competing factions?
I wouldn't even say competing because we had different missions, but they looked at each other differently than they do now. The FBI was actually in charge of investigating
terrorism, right?
Well, it was the domestic terrorism investigative component based upon Executive Order 12333, right? FBI does all domestic counterterrorism and counterintelligence work, which the agency didn't like that a whole lot, but they don't operate domestically. Sort of.
Yeah,
right?
supposedly,
right,
yeah.
sort of. So we had a very kind of, I would say, I hate to say adversarial, but I would say it wasn't very cooperative relationship with them. Actually, information sharing between the agency and the FBI before 9/11 was actually discouraged on some levels, right? 9/11 happens, and then we're kind of thrown together and say, okay, all of you guys screwed the pooch here. FBI particularly, because it was a domestic security failure. CIA, you guys screwed the pooch. So did NSA. But they kind of skirted back into the shadows, and we took it on the chin, deservedly so, because people died because we weren't capable of finding that threat environment and mitigating it, right? So then we started working with them, and at first it was very strange because we have a law enforcement mission. They're an intelligence organization. Some of our operations clash where they do certain things where they don't want us to have that stuff on record. We do certain things where they don't want to be dragged into court. So we had to kind of come to this understanding over time that, hey, sometimes I'm going to go get a cup of coffee when you guys do your thing. And sometimes they will throw us a bone that, an unverified source provided this information, right? Or you guys do what you do and make it court worthy, right? So we came to an understanding. I think the relationship between the agency and the Bureau now is probably the best it's ever been on the working level. Can't really say with the new leadership, but they seem to have a common operating perspective between those at Ratliff and Tulsi Gabbard and Patel and those guys, but that remains to be seen.
Well, I never got the opportunity to ask you what you thought about Patel and Bongino being the head shed. It was always speculated, but I was like, yeah, this is a 50-50 kind of deal. I mean, Patel has always been an outspoken person, wrote a book about the corruption he dealt with, the Russia hoax, etc. But to have him in charge of the action arm in the DOJ, I just never saw that coming. What's your opinion on it?
You know what? I was hopeful at the beginning that he would come in and bring a different perspective, maybe help rebuild the FBI from a different operating view. My three areas that I would have told him that have to be addressed, from his perspective as the FBI director, FBI culture. I think the culture has declined and it's eroded and it's become ineffective over time. It's been actually become negative. The leadership environment, the FBI leadership environment declined over time. We had a bunch of people in charge who were more interested in being liked than they were with being operationally effective. And the operational practices of the FBI. What were we doing versus what should we have been doing, right? I'm talking on a practicing level, not, well, this is what our policy says. Don't care. What are we actually doing and what should we be doing? Those were the three areas I would have told him to look at. And it seems to me that he came in with a strategy of looking for quick wins, focusing on his thing, let good cops be cops and all that good stuff. And they're kind of governing the FBI through the X platform. They're putting out a lot of stuff on X. They're talking about FBI business on X, and I don't think it's a great idea. I think when you're announcing investigative intent on X, I think it's bad practice. I don't know. They'll probably grow into the roles a little bit more if they stay, if they can take the pressure and the
I
heat.
can't see him staying the entire term.
I don't know, man. It's going to be tough for them.
Yeah.
And, one last thing I'll say is that I think both of them are operating at a disadvantage that they freely took on. Patel never worked as a law enforcement officer. That's okay because he's a political appointee. The deputy director should have been the chief of operations for the FBI, who has always been a very senior, accomplished FBI agent. And they brought in Mr. Bongino, who was a Secret Service agent many, many, many years ago. He didn't have the currency and the knowledge of FBI or just general operations because the Secret Service had a pretty, they have a defined mission when you're doing protection work and things of that sort. So I think he was at a disadvantage as well. And I think now the both of them they're trying to find their balance in things. One last thing I'll say on that, Mike. I am just hoping that we do not have any events of a spectacular nature, like a 9/11 type event, or a series of complex coordinated attacks around the country. I don't know how they'll do with that because a lot of the FBI now, the senior folks are gone who knew how to manage those types of events. Say what you will, all the folks in social media about they were crooked, they were corrupt, get rid of everybody, shut down the whole FBI, all that garbage. The FBI is an essential part of our security infrastructure. And I'm just hoping that they can get the organization rebalanced properly from a leadership perspective, that culture and that operational practice perspective, that we can not only identify and prevent, but if we can't do that, we can skillfully respond, save lives, and keep our community safe. So
yeah, it seems like it reminds me of Obama, which you were in the FBI during the Obama years. I was in special operations, and I remember Obama, the presidential candidate, was bragging how he was going to shut down Guantanamo.
Right.
And then he got in, and not only did he not shut down Guantanamo, but he sent more people there than any president. And then he also killed more terrorists in strikes.
He also deported more.
And he deported more illegals.
Than anybody. They called him the deporter in chief,
which is wild, right?
But I think what happened is, again, our social trends. He was lauded by the media, whereas Trump is demonized by the media.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I think Obama had a lot of good karma, so to speak, for some of the stuff that he was doing. That if you took and you switched it out, because I saw an actual clip one day where somebody was doing one of those, man on the street interview, and they talked about all these things, and they said, do you think this was terrible if Trump wanted to do this? And they said, oh my God, yes, he's a fascist, he's a Nazi, all these things. And they said, well, these were all the things Obama did during his administration, and the people were just mouths hanging open.
Of course.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it's perspective. But I do think, when you look at Obama and you look at the times that you mentioned Guantanamo. Have you ever been to Guantanamo? I have. I've been there. And
how is it?
You know what? They did a nice job for a penal. It's a penal colony basically on the base. They did a nice job in building what I considered to be a very constructive environment for our terrorist adversaries. it was a full military installation inside of an installation where these guys got medical care. A lot of them, that's the first time they've ever been to a doctor. They fixed all their teeth the first time they've ever been to a dentist. They had their own places to pray. They were provided with Quran. I mean, there were some of them that were more, I guess, or how would I put it, less hostile. They were able to play soccer. We watched them playing soccer. They had their,
Wow.
I mean, and our own military guys were standing in the heat in full battle rattle, dying because it was hot as all get out. And these guys were
They
doing
had a better life than where they came from,
let me tell you
in
something.
the caves of Afghanistan.
We took away their freedom, so to speak, but they were living much better quality of lives than they would have back in Afghanistan.
Yeah. I thought about that Obama analogy because Patel, he advertised he was going to shut down the Hoover building,
Right.
export everybody out into the hinterlands,
Right.
and get them to do cop stuff. And now I look at it and go, well, he didn't obviously do that. And
he couldn't, Mike.
yeah, there's no way, right?
No.
What's one of the reasons he can't do that?
Couple of things. I mean, a lot of that, again, it sounded like it was campaigning for the job.
Yeah, talking points.
The FBI has a certain number now. They had 56 field offices. Now they have 55. Right? They consolidated 2 offices they consolidated. They have the Nashville field office now. They used to have Memphis and Knoxville. They combined them. So every field office has a certain number of people, just like a military organization. So to send 1,500 people out of D.C., my first question is, are they all agents? What programs are they working in?
Yeah.
You can't send them to the field if they're white-collar crime, public corruption agents and send them to a place that you need gang folks. You got to match up some skill sets.
Yeah.
Or you're just going to give them a liability, a bunch of folks standing around not knowing what to do. Okay? So who's going? Second of all, what timeline are you sending them on? You're just going to have them all like, hey, close the business Monday. You guys you're gone. That doesn't happen, right? They're given, the 90 days. They're given move. They have to get there, set up a new household. So timeline's an issue. So cost. How much do you think it'll cost to move 1,500 people under full government moves? Where are they finding that money in their already reduced budget? I think they were getting clipped about $500 million for this coming up budget cycle, which they might get on a sneaky pass back, right? But overtly they're getting clipped about $500 million. So all of these things, to me, you have to plan those logistics out. So to just say we're sending now, what I also tell folks is that this isn't new. Louis Freeh, when he was the director of the FBI back in the 90s, he kicked everybody out of headquarters. He kicked all the agents out. Told them get back out to the field, go do casework. And then over the years, they kind of filtered back in. And then after 9/11 is when it really kind of got heavy because all the program management became really intense and centralized in DC for, a lot of the national security programs. And that's what happened. And then it's just these programs, of course, if some is good, more must be better. And then too much is just right.
Yeah, briefs well on the campaign trail, but it doesn't execute at all.
Well, people are going to ask them, hey, Cash, how many of those guys have you sent out to the field? And
10.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is if he would just kind of maybe just an informal talk to some of us, and we could say, hey, here are some of the things you might want to look for on this. Here are some of the things you may want to plan for if you're going to make an announcement. You can say over the next 6 to 9 months, this is what I plan to do to reduce the footprint of the FBI in the Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah, he's making a lot of assumptions without all the information or even a percentage of the information.
I mean, think about if you were, I don't know what 1,500 people would be in the Army. What kind of organizational?
Brigade.
Okay, so you're going to take a brigade and just say, okay, all of you go, right? It's not happening.
Not happening.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. I think some of those things some of us guys who have been there before could help just offer perspective. Hey, you can do it, but here's some things you might want to think about, right? So something like that, I think, again, talking to some of the older guys, but, I think they want to do their thing. So,
yeah, this DC Metro collaboration, whatever this is, I don't know how something like that works. And I also think about the capacity of the FBI overall to just have to deal with that on top of everything else they're being stretched very thin for. Do they even have the capability to do that?
Well, first of all, from a capability standpoint, I'll say not immediately because FBI agents are not trained to be cops, street
Yeah,
cops. You're talking about your municipal or county police. They're not trained to do that. They
yeah,
don't go out on patrol. They don't enforce traffic laws. They don't do your basic law enforcement work. That's not what they're trained for. So I think what you're looking at is what exactly are they allowed to do? What should they be doing? Well, how can they use their federal authorities to help augment whatever might be going on in DC? But also, Mike, I think what they're going to have to tell them is you have a very firm set of operating parameters. You have a very firm set of how you can engage with people,
yeah.
and maybe DC will deputize them and allow them to do some things, give them kind of a law enforcement status for a period of time during this initiative. I don't know. They'll maybe do a task force or something. 'Cause that's what we would do. We would deputize the state and local folks so they could help us enforce federal authorities. Right? I used to swear them in, but maybe they'll do the same thing on the other side. But I do think having FBI folks out doing patrol on their own is a recipe for disappointment and possible problems. And I think they're going to take people, from what I saw, from programs like counterintelligence, white collar crime, public corruption, and they're going to have these folks going out and doing this type of work, which is really far from what their basic duty set is. It would be like taking some of, guys in the military who were basic infantrymen and taking them and asking them to do very highly technical cyber warfare type of it. Just, I don't think you're going to get the results you're looking for. And I think you're putting those folks in a tough position to do a good job. And from a leadership perspective, how do you manage these people who are taken out of their day-to-day duty sets, put into this quasi similar world, and to do a good job? How do you get them, keep them motivated, keep them where they're not going to become a liability? I used to tell people this when I used to go out and give talks. The state and local law enforcement partners are the primary deterrent against crime and terrorism. The marked police unit and the uniformed police officer, not the FBI. Because when you see those marked units and you see those uniformed guys and ladies, that's what the criminals stay away from. That's what the terrorists would they would look for more permissive target environments. It's not the FBI. So I don't know how you merge those two worlds in an immediate fashion. You can do it over time, like anything. I don't know how you do it for a 90-day or 120-day initiative. I'm not sure how it's going to work out.
Yeah, it reminds me of commanders that we've had who rotate in every 2-3 year term. They get their battalion command. They want to make miracles happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the ass pain on the ground is up to the guys. They have to deal with it. They have to contend with
They have
it.
to execute.
They have to execute it.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
when you see Trump, because of this beating of this Doge employee,
Yeah.
this young kid gets beat. And I've lived in D.C. It is not a great place. I mean, the fact that the mayor came out today of D.C. making excuses like crime is down, just stop. Southeast D.C. is one of the worst places in the country for crime, and it's disgusting. I mean, there's criminals, organizations, there's gangs. I've seen people get beat and stabbed on the streets of D.C. Stationed at Fort Myer, Virginia, we couldn't even leave the base because our command was like, it's too dangerous.
Yeah, there are some rough neighborhoods in D.C. for sure. I've worked in and out of D.C. for years, and there are rough neighborhoods. But I do think that you're not going to solve this overnight. And we used to have what they used to call a cross-border task force, because a lot of the bad guys, so to speak, they would run back and forth across the D.C. border to Maryland, to D.C. to Maryland, and it would cause a lot of problems. Right? Because then you have jurisdictional problems, and everybody was, kind of scratching their heads. And then they did this task force. The Bureau hosted it with, the folks from Maryland, folks from DC, and started trying to take care of some of those problems. This is a while back. But I know it's a problem that it's recurring. I don't know if there is a solution or if it's just something that has to be managed, right? But I do think that the lax policies of the DC leadership and the willingness to make mistakes is not there. It's replaced by the willingness to make excuses. Right? Hey, we tried this. It didn't work. We're going to try something else.
Yeah.
Now, I saw they did put a curfew in place for juveniles in D.C.
It should be.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that took them a lot to do, because now they're going to catch a lot of heat from the community leaders.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So I remember when I was in Buffalo, Mike, I went and sat with a bunch of the African-American community leaders. And I sat with them, and they wanted to talk about some things. No problem. So we talked about some things, and they started, criticizing the chief of police in Buffalo. And I said, all right, stop. Well, he's a commissioner, was his title. I said, okay, stop. I'm not here to discuss my partners. I'm here to tell you this is what I can do to help you in your communities. So they talked about, jobs and other things. I said, okay, look, invite me into your neighborhoods. Invite me in to help you. Tell everybody I'm there at your request. Invite me, because if all they see is my people taking their sons and fathers and uncles and brothers away at the end of a law enforcement action, that's where they're going to be, in your office, and you will be the same people criticizing me in public for trying to reduce the crime. Same thing is going to happen in DC. You're going to see, I've already seen it. I saw they're already talking about the enforcement of the strict enforcement of laws in DC has a racist overtone to it. And I'm thinking, how can that be? If you break the law, you break the law. And if Washington DC's population is majority African American, then you're obviously going to interact with more African Americans just based on population. We used to have that same problem in Newark, New Jersey. You go down to a town in Orange, New Jersey, East Orange, 90% African American, and they say, well, you're always arresting all the black people in there. Well, that's
9 out of 10.
That's who lives there. So you're going to start seeing that. So I think they're going to have some challenges on how they manage that. But I do think the sentiment's good, Mike, to try to clean up some of that crime in DC, and let's make our capital what it should be. But they can't reverse decades of decline and erosion over the course of this summer.
Yeah, it's not going to take just a summer. And I feel like on top of many other things, it's just causing more friction and just more drama. It's crazy.
Well, I think anything that the current administration does is met with friction and drama.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's, I try to keep that in mind too. When they have some self-inflicted wounds. They don't say or do some things that are probably best put. And here, I'm out in the peanut gallery, and I'm listening to that. And I'm wincing when I hear them say certain things that the administration, not anybody in particular, but the administration says and makes some statements on things. And I'm wincing thinking, oh my God, no. And it's the same thing with the Epstein stuff we talked about. The current administration just gave the opposing party a platform for the midterms with the Epstein files. You just handed it to them.
Yeah, you see it in every comment on every video of every single thing.
Yeah, you just handed it to them because it was handled in a, I hate to say, I'm going to use a word that I'll regret later, but an amateurish fashion. You think that they would have coordinated that a little better. You think they would have said, here's how it's going to go, and here's what I think you guys should be doing, and here's what we're going to present as our strategy. And they didn't do that. So
what's your take on the cartels now? It was over the weekend, but especially this morning, we already know they were designated foreign terrorist organizations, every major cartel in Latin America. But this morning, the New York Times and the Washington Post leaked that they had sources close to the president, that the president over the weekend stated he wanted options, military options, specifically for special operations, intel options, and then he wanted basically to go in and strike cartel members.
I think it sounds great, but if you look at it, you're a military guy. I served in the Air Force, so it wasn't a real military, right? So, if you think about this, right, and I look at it from when I was with the FBI, national security issues, law enforcement issues, logistical issues, we can designate them to open up authorities to work against them. From the national security side, there are a lot more areas of latitude that you can do against terrorist organizations comprised of foreign nationals than you could do against people inside the United States, right? So we opened up authorities that we could use against these people. My problem is when you start looking at military options on the border, do we create a DMZ? Because are we going to make incursions into another sovereign country that happens to be kind of a quasi ally, right? Sometimes they run hot and cold on how much they love the United States. So are we going to make strikes into another ally's sovereign territory? Are we going to go across and kill what would be, Mexican nationals, even though they are scumbags and they're in cartels, they're Mexican nationals. How do we do that? I mean, surveillance, we can use the eyes in the sky and we could use our SIGINT and everything else. That's fine. But how do we do invasive operations? And what do we do if they start shooting back? Like they take pot shots across the rivers in certain areas at our Customs and Border Protection. They sit across the rivers from anecdotal reports firing at our guys.
Yeah.
So, but from a military perspective, what are the rules of engagement in dealing with those people to where they know that our guys aren't down there as paper tigers? If you poke the bear, you're going to get bit. And if we go in and we do some strikes and we do whatever, and we show them that we're serious, last thing I'll say on this to keep the conversation shorter. Okay, so the cartels take a few hits, we bloody their nose, we embarrass them a little bit, show them that, Uncle Sam, not going to tolerate this. So then they start doing things inside the United States. You start with shootings, you start with kidnappings, you start with, smaller level things around the United States where they are already here. And they start conducting acts of violence inside the United States. I think people will lose their optimism for those operations very quickly.
Yeah, I what you just said is nearly exactly what I said this morning. If we go in, you're potentially violating the sovereignty of a country where the president of Mexico has already said, she will not allow us to go in to do unilateral operations. But let's say it's a bilateral option. What happens the first target, like in Afghanistan, where there are known civilians that were killed on the target?
Right.
And that media leaks.
It won't leak, Mike. It'll be.
Oh yeah,
it'll be
There'll
out
be
there.
Univision will be right in front of the target set.
Yeah, absolutely, right. And what about this? We go on this campaign, and the next thing we know, we start seeing Chinese advisors in Mexico. What then?
Yeah, proxy war.
I mean, it has layers of ugliness that a lot of folks are, once you get past the rah, let's take it to them, send our soft folks down there and let's just take them out like cockroaches, which I think we could probably do a pretty good job.
Yeah.
What people don't understand too is a lot of those cartels are heavily armed. They're heavily, like, I would say paramilitarized, because they hire all the folks either from the Mexican military, who we train, or they'll hire mercenary type of folks from other places. So it's not as if we used to have, and I say we as the United States, not me as the FBI, and this is in your world, but we went and we fought against Taliban and other ISIS level fighters, and some of them are pretty good fighters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not just a bunch of, goat herders and sandals and, rusty old AKs. Some of them are good fighters. And what happens if they start showing up down here on our border?
And they have good equipment. I mean, the cartels,
they have money.
Lack of equipment.
They have money.
Yeah.
They buy good stuff. They're probably buying all of our stuff that we left in Afghanistan.
Probably are. All right, let's further explore this cartel thing, because it's an interesting topic, and you could offer some insight on it. So we have a situation where if we launch a campaign against specific cartels, there's 5 or 6 major ones in Mexico alone that we're going after. Like, let's say Sinaloa. They have so much influence, government, politically, all the state, all the entire country of Mexico, which is big, which is large. They have a lot of power and influence. It reminds me of like the beginning of the global war on terror. You there's this idea that you're going to go in and everything's going to end in a short period of time because we have the might of the American military behind us, and they're surgical. They hit with precision. But these guys will continue to, what's the word? I mean, NPCs. There's probably millions of NPCs in Mexico that are willing to put their life on the line for the cartel. When you kill one, you're going to produce 5 to 10.
It's the radicalization, Mike.
It's yeah.
You have the Americans coming in and killing our husbands and wives, brothers, sisters. You're radicalizing.
That's going to be the PR campaign, right?
Right?
Their PR campaign.
Absolutely. And then they're going to look for help. And like I said earlier, what happens when the Chinese advisors start showing up? What happens if Russian advisors start showing up? Just like we're doing in other places. What happens when the Chinese or the Russians start providing them with weaponry and advanced
They will,
equipment?
right?
Because what are we doing?
In Ukraine, we're giving them, yeah.
Absolutely. So you're looking at a very complex issue. Here's another one to think about. Look what happened to Hamas over in the West Bank and Gaza areas. They've been a designated terrorist organization since I can remember. Okay. When I came into the Bureau, I used to work in those areas of Palestinian rejectionist groups. Hamas was one of them. This is back in the 90s. They were a designated terrorist organization, right? They somehow have become a political organization.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at some of these cartels, like you said, they have political influence, they have money, they have all kinds of different infrastructures that they control. They are becoming quasi-political organizations. Hezbollah did the same thing in Lebanon. In Lebanon, they voted themselves into the government there and became more the governing party. So these groups try to legitimize themselves, and then they start working through the government systems. I think what we're looking at is, do we have the political will, which I think the answer is no. Do we have the political will to really go toe-to-toe with these people? They know that we lose interest and we lose our enthusiasm for things over a period of time.
You mentioned this idea of potentially a DMZ. I had never thought about that, but we did it the same thing in 1953 with Korea. It still exists, obviously. I can't see any other way when you go full-scale war with cartels that are so deeply embedded in the country,
right,
and in Mexico. What other way can you do it? You have to, right?
I don't know if there's another way that you can do it that's considered to be safe and sustainable.
Okay.
Right? Here's another problem. I'm sure you've heard about all the tunnels on the border.
Yeah.
Right? The cartels have built tunnels. So we have to close them all down. We got to find them. And then what do we do with them? You know, are we going to do tunnel warfare with these people?
Yeah.
Or are we just going to close the tunnels? And I know there are ways we can render them unusable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So those are other things that you have to worry about, making sure that those tunnels aren't used, making sure that they're closed for good. And you know, does our southern border become a tour of duty for the military folks?
I was thinking that.
And Mike, here's the other thing, Mike. I'll tell you this from my own experience. Everybody forgets that we have a northern border that is unfortified. It's the largest unfortified border in the world between us and Canada. The Canadians are doing some weird stuff up there right now in their social structures, right?
Yeah.
When I was in Buffalo, a couple of my guys were telling me we were doing, you know, they were orienting me to the operating environment. And they said in the wintertime is when you get the most traffic of smuggling things in and out over through the reservations. We had Indian reservations.
Yeah.
And somehow we didn't patrol them. The state police did. I don't know how that deal was worked out, because usually the FBI manages the reservations because they're sovereign nations.
Yeah.
So, you know, federal.
Yep.
But somehow they worked out a deal that the state police does it up in New York, which I didn't argue about. What they said was, we can't find them generally because when the bodies of water freeze over in the winter, they come across the bodies of water. They don't come across any of the land crossings. So they wait and they come across the water.
Wow.
So if you think about it, there's so much money to be made in the U.S. for a lot of the drug trafficking and some of the other business they're in. They will move their operations to the northern border. The Canadians can't deal with them.
Yeah.
They and I think they're socially very liberal. It'll be a problem for them before they know it.
Yeah.
And they'll start coming across the northern border.
Yeah. They'll let them fly in. They'll probably pay for them to fly in.
Exactly. And I know I was talking to a gentleman, he's a former Bureau guy, lives up in Montana, says there's already trained Diaragua and other people up in Montana. So
Wow.
they're getting ready.
Yeah.
They see, and they're going to sit out the next 3 years. You watch, they're going to sit it out
Yeah.
because they know Trump is kind of unpredictable. They don't know if he'll bring the heat, right? So they'll say, hey, we'll just wait and see what happens on their next election cycle.
We'll be patient.
Exactly.
What's worst case scenario, domestic threat wise,
Mm.
in your opinion, from working terrorism in the United States with the amount of people that I assume from the cartels
Right.
that have infiltrated this country?
It's interesting you ask that. I did a thought exercise the other day with a couple of guys that I know. And what I told them was, and I'll drill it down real fast. So the number that I hear thrown around a lot is 11 million people that the Biden administration had allowed to enter the country. So you can figure it's probably closer to between 15 and 20 million.
Yeah.
But they admitted to about 11 million. Okay. So if you even take a fraction, say, I think it was like I used like 0.1%, and I drilled it all the way down, and I said, of those, take half of these people, a quarter of this, and I came up with a number of about maybe, some military age males and all this. I came up with about 2,750 people on this exercise that could be a combination of gang members, foreign intelligence operatives, terrorists, criminals, just a whole rogue gallery of people. And then I figured out, based on U.S. military structuring, that's between 5 and 6 battalions,
Yeah.
right, of potential bad guys that we allowed to enter the country.
Mm.
Where would any American say that, oh, yeah, okay. If you were going to say, put some PRC uniforms on them, put some Russian military uniforms, North Korean military uniforms on, 5 to 6 potential battalions of bad guys who are in our country, they're in our communities. We don't know where they all are. We don't know who they are. And they could be here for anything ranging from just crime to what I'd like to hope doesn't happen, but there's a chance that you're going to have a series of complex coordinated attacks across the U.S. They're going to hit permissive targets. They're going to lock the country down within a 24-hour period.
Yeah.
They're going to hit schools, hospitals.
Soft targets.
They're going to go to all those soft targets, those permissive targets. And if they're really feeling kind of spunky, you're going to see a lot of first responder attacks.
Mm.
You're going to see the secondary devices. You're going to see old school IRA type of stuff they used to do against the British.
Mm.
You're going to start seeing that type of thing. And the last thing I'm just concerned about is there's this new thought that you're going to start seeing what they call Fidelian or Fedayeen style attacks, where these guys they're going to want to fight.
Mm.
They're not going to run.
Mm.
When our 2 or 3 police show up or a couple of police cars show up, they're used to people either fleeing or complying, or maybe if you have to, use force, whatever. They're not used to a bunch of people rolling out of cars.
Enemy combatants. Yeah.
And these guys are combatants. They're not,
Yeah.
they're not, your street scumbags and your street gang members. These are combatants.
Mm.
They're going to roll out and they're going to engage our law enforcement. And I think the majority of our law enforcement is not ready for that type of engagement.
Yeah.
They're just not.
They just don't experience it.
It's not part of their training. It's not part of their thought process, and it's not part of the. What I like to say, we've lost the warrior mindset on a lot of that stuff, and people always say we don't want warriors, we want protectors. Part of protectorship is warriorship.
Mm.
You cannot protect if you cannot bring focused or judicious violence to a situation.
Yeah.
Right. You can't protect anything.
Yeah.
Right.
You need to do both.
You got to have protectorship and warriorship. And I'm just afraid a lot of our law enforcement now, they have that more of the, community policing mindset and everything. And I don't know if they're ready for this stuff, Mike. And I don't know if our communities are ready for the shock that it's going to bring, where it's going to shut down our whole society for days after schools are hit or malls are hit, and there's going to be gunfights in the streets. I mean, a Mumbai style attack, right? I mean, these are all things from your world and mine, my previous world, that I'm thinking, when is it going to happen? Don't know. I don't know if we're ready. And I don't know if a lot of places are taking it seriously enough, because to have that protective mindset takes energy and resources and money.
Yeah.
And it seems like none of those are in big supply right now.
Yeah. They're not it doesn't seem like it's a priority. Instagram's a priority.
Well,
Social media TikTok's a priority.
well, I mean, that has its own destructive, methodology where they're demoralizing our society, they're demoralizing our children, and kind of pumping nonsense into our thought processes. But when the violence begins, that's when I'm worried we're not going to be ready for it. And people say, well, look at our federal law enforcement. We'll just deploy them. People don't realize there's only between, I'd say maybe anywhere around 12, so I'd say around 12,000 FBI agents for the whole country, as compared to New York City, who has 40,000 NYPD cops for the five
Wow.
boroughs of New York.
Wow.
So, if you're thinking of you're going to have this mass, what are you going to do? You're going to have the military walk and patrol. I mean, it was like that after 9/11 in northern New Jersey. I'll tell you that. In the New York area, I mean, fully kitted out SWAT teams walk. It was surreal.
Hmm.
Are we going to have that again? I mean, who's going to tolerate that? And then people are going to be worried about the emergency powers that are going to be put in place. We're going to be Patriot Act 2.0, 3.0. I mean, don't know. So I'm looking at all of the first and second order consequences of they're in our communities. How do we ferret that out without infringing upon the rights and the privacy and the civil liberties of our citizens? We have to protect people, but we don't want to take away their rights and their ability to live their lives. And we want to do it and the way I look at it, I encompass it this way. The FBI and its law enforcement and intelligence partners, they have to do it in a skilled, objective, apolitical, and professional manner.
Hmm.
Nothing else will do.
Hmm.
And I'm not sure we're in the right place to do that right now. That's what my biggest concern is. And I'm on the outside now, Mike. So are you. And now I depend on them to protect my family, my friends, my community, and I just don't know where we stand right now.
So people need to get prepared. You're doing training, right? You're offering some training.
Well,
Are you doing for a training company or
a friend of mine, he was a guy, he was former government person like myself. He used to do interrogations down in Guantanamo Bay. He was one of the high value detainee interrogation group folks. They were a cadre of people highly trained to go down and engage with the Guantanamo contingent. They used to go overseas and look at other high value detainees or folks that we would want to talk with. And taking my background in national security, counterterrorism, counterintelligence, technical operations, we're trying to get together and go out and start talking to people about this stuff. And I'm not going to tell you what firewall to buy. I'm not talking about cybersecurity like, Mike, you got to update your Windows. That's not what we're talking about. What we want to talk about is I oversaw operations for the U.S. government. We were the boogeymen. We were the people who did this stuff to our adversaries, competitors, and crime organizations. It's how we competed against them. We were the ones who brought them in and interrogated them. We gained the intelligence. We worked against their networks. I think too many people see that as esoteric TV. Why does it matter to me? I just gave a talk recently and told, here's why it matters to you. And I explained it to them all. A safe, healthy community is more likely to be a prosperous community, which is better for business, which you then have a responsibility to work with your governmental partners as the private sector leaders to make sure your communities remain safe, healthy, prosperous.
Mm.
A scared community is not a prosperous community.
Mm.
And that's where all the resources start going for security related reactive things, overreaction.
Mm.
I think I heard a great one, and you might have heard this, but it's called the American OODA loop. The OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody said there's an American version of that is we observe, overreact, destroy, and apologize.
Yeah.
And that's what tends to happen after
Yeah.
a national security issue or a big shooting. You tend to get the overreaction.
Mm.
And that's what I think we got to guard against. But I don't know where the tipping point is right now with, my former colleagues and people in the intelligence community. What are they willing to do to protect us from those threats? And what are we willing to accept to be protected from those threats?
Mm. Yeah, good point. Well, Chris, I appreciate your insight, man. I hope we don't get to that point where, we might be talking about it on the couch post the attack and what we did
Yeah,
right, what we did wrong, mostly what we did wrong.
Mike, I would love to avoid a post game review,
Yeah, for
but
sure.
I would be glad to do one with you,
Yeah.
from the different perspectives, from the tactical side, from the national security policy side. One other thing, if you don't mind, I'd like to throw in there, and I'm proud of this. I wrote a book last year
Mhm.
about my time with the FBI, and I just published an audio version of it. So it's
Oh, are you doing the voice?
yeah, I did. No, I didn't do the voice.
Oh, you
No,
didn't?
no, no one wants to hear me bumbling through a book. I hired an actual professional,
Yeah.
and so I have an audio version of my book, Wanted: The FBI I Once Knew, for folks so they can see the FBI's journey
Perspective.
and
Yeah.
how we got to the point where we are now.
Yeah.
What kind of things went bad, and how we can get things back on track. Wish I could have a sit down with the current leadership, but even if that doesn't happen, I wish them the best because I count on them for protection for my family.
Yeah. We'll make sure we link that down below. And that's awesome you did the audio version of it. It's more digestible, right?
Oh, absolutely. Nobody reads books anymore, but I didn't know what the reaction would be to the book, and I got some good feedback on
Yeah.
it. And a lot of folks said, I would love to hear it, not necessarily read it. So a lot of folks do that now in their cars. They just drive around,
Yeah. On
they
their
commute,
commutes. Yeah.
and then they listen to books. So I broke down and did the audio version.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I appreciate you, Chris. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Mike, thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you.